Hi, how are you?
I am
Taking us a
well. How
while.
about you two?
Well, I'm so happy we're finally doing this. And for anybody who doesn't know, Randy pretty much single handedly almost funded the entire last season of Talking
Thank you so
Teal
much, Randy. You're such a
Ah,
good
my
friend.
pleasure.
on behalf of the
Absolutely, my
entire
pleasure.
Talking Teal community. Thank you.
Ah, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Well, this was kind of yours to choose what to talk about, and I really hope you choose to talk about something we actually remember because
Yeah,
it's
it's
been
been
a
a
year
while.
since we watched Wentworth.
Wow. Um, that's good. I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
Do
I mean, we could
you
talk about anything.
do you revisit them? Have you watched them again since the season's end?
Oh,
And
I watch it at work. I'm obsessed. I don't know why. I can't. I think I just want to go to Australia and just be in prison.
Oh,
It just
well,
looks.
I'm not sure it's
It,
as fun
it
as they
doesn't
make it
look
look.
fun, even with those beautiful women. It's a pretty dangerous place.
yeah, no, not necessarily that, but just because of the mental health issues are just
So you want to
insanity.
work in prison, not to be in
Yes,
prison.
you could be the
Yeah,
You can be
yeah, but
you
Bridget.
I
could be
want
Bridget.
to. Well, I don't. Nobody can be Bridget. So,
It's true.
but yeah, I would have liked that. I mean, because they're all very interesting in their characters and their personas that
And
they
their
have.
pathologies.
They have a lot. Every single person there. I think the highest functioning member of that entire show for all their seasons is probably Boomer.
Yeah, I think you're right in a way of emotional.
She knows who she is.
Yeah, and she doesn't, and that never changes through the whole series. It's interesting that she was only supposed to be on one episode and ended up being, a key character all the way through it. So,
There's
I think the
there's
only
so
thing
many
that
characters that happens to over the years on shows. Someone just shows a spark and people take an interest, and that's it. Well,
absolutely,
I think it's Katrina.
absolutely.
I think that Katrina made Boomer who she is or who she ended up being, and I think before they saw Katrina in that character, maybe they couldn't understand the potential of the character.
Yeah, probably not. I think that, interestingly enough, you have to think about the writers and their pathology that goes along with it all.
The
To think,
writer's pathologies. Let me just call Pete a
let's call
second.
Pete. Right, Pete. We're discussing your pathology as a head writer here on Wentworth.
absolutely. I mean, you have to. There's something intrinsic in the brain and the thought processes that are allow you to go in that direction
It's true.
of some of the things that were done. Whoever the main writer was for, obviously, Joan Ferguson, uh, did very well until the last season.
Well, I
Really?
liked the last season.
You think?
Anyway,
Oh,
this is
I
a
Yeah.
this is a good thing to talk about, by the way. All of
Yes,
the
we're
characters'
analyzing.
pathologies.
yeah. So, but the catch is that when you're a psychopath, you don't have the ability to have emotion, and yet she had this emotion towards Vera that was really visceral in a lot of different ways. Through the first seasons that she was in, she was just a bitch, and yet at the very end, her last scene is this compassion and this love and this understanding. And the unfortunate thing is, psychopaths can't do that. So I wish it were true. I wish that were something that could be done.
Is
Well,
there?
she had some other. Whoa,
What is that?
I don't know. I'm sounding weird.
Yeah, no, it must be some feedback from your end.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say that can't ever a person who has
Psychopathy.
psychopathy also have emotion? Is it just an absolute black and white thing?
Well, I don't know if it's black and white because a lot of them can have outside relationships, families and children and that sort of thing. The difference with Joan is she didn't have any of that. Even growing up, she didn't have her. She watched her mother be murdered, and you kind of have to draw from her relationships with when she's seeing her father and talking to him, that even then she was raised without the ability to have an emotional side to her other than significant anger. So I think that on some level it can appear that they do, but if they do, they don't understand it. So they don't know how to use it correctly. But she was sick. I mean, I worked in forensics at the state hospital here for a number of years and dealt with
wow.
Anyone from mass murders to somebody who shoplifted, and it all evolves around competency restoration and whether or not they can understand what they're doing. And the thing about psychopaths is that they know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what the outcome is going to be, because they won't do anything that they don't have the ability to understand the end result, unless the end result is a complete surprise. And in this case, her reaction to Vera was full of compassion and genuine love and that. And the interesting thing is that Vera had the exact same thing towards her at the end, just letting her walk off. And then when it's brought up that Joan can't be found, she doesn't say a word. She just lets her go.
Do you think that it could be? I'm sorry, we're getting feedback from your speaker when we were speaking a little bit. Do you think that it could be that for Joan, Vera was something that she felt was her property, or kind of it was more of an ownership kind of a thing, less than love, and maybe that could explain it? How it wasn't necessarily like a compassionate, emotional thing, but more of a
your mind.
Yeah, kind of like wanting to control her, wanting to own her.
Are you talking about Joan towards Vera, or Vera towards Joan?
Joan
towards Vera. No, I don't think.
I think so. I think that the whole thing, Joan was always like this antagonist with always fighting back, constantly fighting back, and Joan would just go to extremes to try and get her become this monster as portrayed, and she doesn't do it. And I think that on some level, Joan probably takes responsibility for that, in that she had taught her well, if you will.
Do you think that her
I know it's very hard.
Do you think that her cat persona maybe opened her up to some real feelings?
What do you mean by that?
Well, Kath, she really did.
She was almost like an alter ego.
Yeah, Kath was like an alter ego for her, and that made it possible for her to actually feel something she hadn't felt before.
If that's not even realistic.
Yeah, is that something that can happen?
That's a good question. I don't know of any cases where that has happened. However, I think you're right. I think it tapped into something that was absent of the aggression and the anger and the frustration and the pain of how she grew up and all of that. I think that it gave her an idea that there was maybe another option than that. When she's talking to Greg and she says, "I miss her," that says a lot about her now struggle between the two. I mean, she's fighting, they're fighting against each other. And so I think that in some level, it would be interesting to be around a case that, but you have to have the same variables happening in order for that to happen. And I don't know. That's a good question. I've seen a lot of, psychopaths that talk about their families and people that they love and then when you ask them to describe what love feels like, they have absolutely no concept of it. whatsoever.
And does it make a difference if I don't know if I got this right, but I read in trying to find the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath, which is an ongoing conversation we have. I read about, is it something that is born or is it something that happens out of trauma? So does it make a difference? So for example, if somebody, Joan, for example, from the final season, what we gather is it is that trauma in the way that she was raised, but she was born with the ability to feel. It was just kind of,
beaten out of her.
Exactly. So maybe it's a difference between something that, as you said, towards Vera was very visceral, but she couldn't put it into words, or she couldn't necessarily act on the awareness of what love means and make choices that were that had a value system that valued love and caring for another person, but she could still feel something that she couldn't understand.
I think that most of our mind is all about learned behavior and what can happen. I mean, you saw with what was her name? Jody, how she went from this very sweet, kind young woman into this total basket case that had no control over her thoughts or her ideas, any of that. She had absolutely no control. And so when you're brainwashing and waterboarding and doing all these different things that Joan was doing to her, you see the end result. And she, of course, ends up on a psych ward somewhere.
Without an eye.
Yeah, with
missing an eye.
In her eye.
But then, Joan's not the only psychopath, in this.
No, but she was the primary one. I mean, she was the most fascinating.
Well, she was the one they invested the most in.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen her in, oh God, what was her name?
Give us a hint.
This is my problem as well. What was her name?
Well, between the three of us, we'll probably be able to get it.
Who?
Lou.
Oh, Lou. I would never have remembered that was her name. I would say Kate Box, but I wouldn't remember
Lou, right.
No, that I remember. But yeah, Lou's character was clearly off the hook.
She was also interesting.
And again, we didn't get enough of a backstory to understand what brought her there, because she was a very interesting character.
I hated her. I loved the actress,
Kate. Yeah,
but
the character.
I really didn't like Lou.
Yeah, there were several I didn't like. I just absolutely abhorred Doreen. I just did not deal with her whiny ass behavior. And
Little Miss Goody
on.
She rubbed everybody the wrong way by the time she left.
Lord, she's bitching and moaning about how it's an evil place, and yet you should have thought of that before you got me. In the beginning, they did give the backstories of the main characters, which I thought
the
was
flashbacks.
They were sorely missed.
Really with, unless I missed it, and I've watched them, from beginning to end about 4 million times. But
then I think you didn't miss it.
They didn't really do a backstory on her, other than her mom was, kind of a jerk, and dad wasn't in the picture. But it never really gave you the idea of what happened that put her into prison.
Well, I think, and this was a long time ago, and I didn't watch them more than the one time, so I might be mistaken, but I think that with Doreen, the idea was kind of to show how sometimes just one dumb mistake, what was she? She was drunk and she got behind the wheel, something like that.
Yeah.
How sometimes that's all that it takes to change a person's course in life, and there wasn't anything, I don't think, that was intrinsically... she didn't have any serious mental health issues, or she didn't come from a very, terrible background. She just made a stupid mistake one time, and that was it. I think that was my understanding of that. That was kind of the idea. And I think prison is full of these people. Well, maybe not full of, but I think there are people. I think actually with the show, I think what I loved so much about B is that he showed how so many women end up in prison because of the abuse that they had from men, which forced them to do something or they ended up, having kind of being on a trajectory in life because that set them on that trajectory, and they end up, they're themselves are their victims, and they end up in prison. We saw that also with Tammy's
backstory was the most moving and the most well done. I still see that golden light.
Just
Cass, right?
In the horse and
the carousel and.
Yeah, although you're kind of, I don't know, it's kind of left with, is this really what happened? There's this perception of what happened.
It's probably somewhere in between.
Yeah, well, it always is. I mean, in every lie, every truth, there's an element of truth and there's an element.
And the fact that the golden hues that it was colored in meant that it was really through her perception, her nostalgic eyes. It wasn't necessarily exactly what happened, but what is ever really a reality? It's all about what we make of it, how we perceive it, and how we remember it. So,
and it shifts. Mm-hmm. It's shifting.
Yeah, it was interesting that you could watch her fall in love with Will and not be able to express that until she sees Will with
Susie Porter.
Yeah, Susie Porter, and then you all of a sudden now you know that this
Mari.
she's been betrayed by another man
again,
yeah. So I mean, every single character is interesting in their own right, and how they got where they got. It was, I think, what kind of irritates me a little bit is you don't know the time frame of everything. So you don't know, it took 8 years or whatever it was to film this, or almost 10 or whatever it was. Yet everything seems to be a continuation of maybe 1 or 2 years.
Never thought of that.
Really know what's going on. I mean, Vera was pregnant for like 2 years, and so was. No, this isn't going well.
I know the feeling, though.
Yeah, this is me after a very long week.
What did you think about Smiles' PTSD story?
I think that it was BS. I mean, you got to remember that from the very beginning, she's not exactly the nicest character in the world, and she's always, out for herself and always trying to make her life better and doesn't really care about anybody else. I think it got to a point where with Anne, she just gave her permission to go ahead and be this diabolical, vicious person. I think she genuinely was upset when Anne started beating.
Who
was she
was
beating?
That?
Oh, it was the Judy. Although I wasn't as upset when she was beating Judy.
Yeah, we didn't like Judy.
I have to say that when I was watching, my favorite line in all of your Talking Teals is Mimi, when you said she was a waste of skin. I had to literally pause the TV because I was laughing so hard I couldn't hear the rest of it. But I have to say I've used it since then. So.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm sure I stole it from someone.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I wasn't the first to utter
you
those
gave
words,
it panache.
but
Yes, definitely did that. So.
Well, I'm
I never, I don't know, maybe it's because I love her so much, but I never got a sense that Smiles was an actually mean person. I felt she was sarcastic.
Yeah, we loved her too,
but she had, like, underneath that, she was just kind of an annoyed person. She had her gambling thing, but I didn't feel that she was bad. She was always looking out for herself, that's for sure, but I never got the sense that she would do anything sadistic or mean to do that. So when the PT, to me, it's just also, I don't know, and again, maybe it's my misunderstanding of the idea, but I never liked the fact that they used PTSD to turn her into a very horrible person. All of a sudden she's homophobic, she's all these other things. I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way.
When they're talking about PTSD being about flashbacks and stuff like that, it's not really about they're flashing back to the actual incident. They're actually, I believe, they're flashing back to the actual emotion and fear attached to those incidents.
Right.
I know that in treatment of PTSD since this particular war, the focus is on the emotion and not re-traumatizing them by making them relive it over.
Right.
And I think that with Miles, that it was literally the emotion that she was feeling at the time. She absolutely froze. And, she curled up in the corner and nobody seemed to really notice what was going on with her. So I don't know that it was really PTSD or just a significant episode of reliving the emotion that was attached to her. I don't think she ever got past that because she wouldn't go to therapy. She wouldn't
deal with it.
Well, but nobody also made her deal with it. I mean, they kept her working with the same population in these same situations, and nobody actually made her do anything to take care of herself. And I think that's also on them, not just on her.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think Anne was probably the catalyst for that because, Miles was able to just do whatever Anne said and surpass the fact that her actual boss was Will and not Anne.
Well, because Will is useless. Sorry.
Yeah. Did you find it interesting that every woman he fell in love with was stabbed to death?
Yeah, ended up dying. I know. I never realized it was in the same way.
Right?
The Black Widower.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh my God, how many of these women do you go through? I don't know. I saw a lot of the clients that I had at the hospital on this show, and I think that that's probably why I enjoyed it so much. Anything that has to do with psychopathy and the bizarre, and I'm always interested in that. And
what did you think about the psilocybin? Is that what it was called? Was that a magic potion drug that could actually make psychopaths feel and make people with Alzheimer's remember?
It may have some effects on memory. But no, not on psychopaths. And it didn't matter because he was giving her a placebo after, like they said, after the first blood test that came up as an anomaly. Mm-hmm. So there's no way of really knowing whether psilocybin was going to really have an effect on.
No, I was just wondering if that's something that the Wentworth writers got because it's actually a thing, or if they made it up so that to drive the plot.
Well, any psychopath can be managed, just like any mental illness can be managed. But you have to have, the consent of the person who has to take the medication. So there's no way.
Consent is something they played around with on Wentworth.
Didn't they just?
But it's not unheard of. I mean, we have research in mental health all the time, especially in medications and what's going to be effective, what's not going to be effective. But like I said, the brain is really new in infancy in trying to understand this absolutely amazing and difficult to understand how the brain functions, how it works well with one person and works really crappy with another person. And is it genetically tied or is it not?
So I have two final questions, but did you have a question you want to ask?
I just wanted to you to list maybe the different the characters and what you think their psychopathy was.
Oh my God, everybody? No.
The top,
top
6 or 5 or 6.
Maybe the top characters that you find that maybe Wentworth got right. What do you think?
Sure.
The characters that Wentworth got right in their kind of mental health.
That they did get right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they got B right. She went from this terrified woman who didn't know where to go or what to do and became very desperate in thinking that, killing her husband was the answer. But also, in fact, that she ended up, being she wiped out an entire mob family. She tapped into her inner self and was able to be protective, not just of herself, but realized when Debbie dies, that she really has no power to do that. So why is she trying to do it over and over and over again? And she believes that if she somehow kills Braden, that it will take the pain away. And when she's talking to Kaz in that first meeting, where she says it was just pure hatred, it didn't solve anything, it didn't change anything. And I think that they got that right, very right. I think they got. I think the interesting thing is, everybody's favorite, from what I can see, is Frankie, and I think that they. It's interesting because she's a lesbian to start with, and so to have multiple people think she's the best character ever is interesting, because I'm going to assume that not everybody watched. That everybody that was watching Wentworth was there.
Not everybody.
No, it's not everybody, but there would be some. Is that she goes from this bruised, unbelievably bruised child to being able to literally change her entire life, and all it took was somebody that made her believe she was worth something. That's very hard to do. You get to see the end result in that. Those of us in the field, you do therapy and you do it, and then eventually your client or patient is able to manage on their own, but you never see the end result. It's not like building a bridge or building a house. So you just kind of hopefully speculate that they do well, but you got to see that on this, and I thought that was really good. I think that they got Vera. Vera was she the first person who killed somebody on the show?
She might have been.
Really? Because her mother?
Yeah, because she euthanized her mother, but she didn't really. To me, she didn't really. She put her mother out of her own misery, not just out of Vera's misery. Yeah. I think enough was enough, and this woman needed to die, but didn't know how to say, you need to let me go. So I think that with Vera, I think they got her right, and I was happy that you got to see her from the beginning to the end.
Right.
The person that she became, this strong and vibrant woman who had enormous power, but knew how to use her power in ways that were beneficial to the people she was serving, which is the women of Wentworth.
I loved Vera.
I did too. There was a couple of times I would have liked to slap the shit out of her, but it's who doesn't?
Exactly.
They definitely got Katrina's character absolutely perfect. They're literally, as I watched her, there was nothing about her that one was evil or vicious. It was always meant with compassion, even when she was, the henge of things. She still hated doing it, didn't want to do it. So I loved her. Kaz was an anomaly. She was just a really broken person, and couldn't understand that she couldn't do violence towards women, but she could do violence towards men. And the whole time she's, beating the crap out of her father. I mean, each time didn't matter what that person had done. And then when she finds out that the one person, the reason that she's in prison, had not done the crime, I think that kind of destroyed her a little bit. But it also allowed her to now become vicious and do certain things. But she was also able to stop that at some point too.
What about poor Liz?
Liz,
she was an alcoholic.
Yeah, she was.
Exactly. She was an alcoholic, but you never found there was never a precipitation. There had to be a reason why she decided to become an alcoholic. I wish she would have dove into her childhood and what it was like for her growing up, and because she clearly felt not good enough ever, even in raising her children or being married, or doing anything. Even the party was something that just wasn't good enough. And so she would just clearly turn to alcohol. Blamed herself for her daughter, who ends up in, at Wentworth, and then gets drunk because her daughter, is being manipulated by Frankie, and has her own anger. But you at least understand Sophie's anger, but you don't understand Liz's anger and where it comes from. I wish that's the only part of the whole show that I absolutely wish they hadn't done. I wish they had not killed her off.
Me too.
I wish that she would have been there to the end with Boomer, and because together they were a force to be reckoned with as far as compassion and love for the human condition and the people around them.
They were necessary.
Okay, so now I want to know which of the characters, just name one, that you thought they got so wrong.
I think that, let's see here. I think they got, I want to say, Fletch. I want to say they got him wrong. He was such a brutal force and didn't really understand, but his was really because of what happened to him during the war. And I don't think that, her reading his diary and then, speculating that he might be the killer of Meg, I think that was really done poorly, because I don't think he would have just said, fuck you, and you're not going to be in my life anymore. Because he really did care for her. And yeah, it was just so vicious the way that ended. So I think that was probably the one they got wrong the most. So,
tell me what the most missed opportunity. Those 3 questions that Joan asks Bridget that went nowhere. That was such a moment.
Oh,
there was
yes.
we could have gone on such an interesting ride into Bridget's past.
We couldn't wait for the payoff for that, to see what
that was about. They analyzed every inch of Libby's face in response to those reaction to those questions, and went nowhere.
It's interesting because she took a lot of abuse from people on that. I mean, she gets fired by Bridget or by Vera, and then 2 days later, she's knocking on her door needing help, and it's like, seriously? That would not happen in my life. That's the damn sure.
This is why everybody loves Bridget.
Bridget was hope. Yeah. Bridget was hope. She was hope, and she was light, and she was
empathy and kindness.
She would always bring in some. The darkest of situations and shows, Bridget would light it up. She would. She was a very necessary character, and without Bridget, we sort of had Liz. But when you needed your nanny, you needed the person, the nurturer. Everybody should have a nurturer, and they needed it in prison, and that's what I think Bridget was. She was hope.
She was. I think that they didn't use her as well as they could have, because she was such. She was kind, but at the very beginning, she's after Ferguson. She is under her skin, and you see her manipulate Ferguson into giving her what she wants, and the same thing with Vera, and when she wanted Vera to drop the charge,
Well, and that was another thing that we loved about Bridget, was that she was kind and empathetic, but she wasn't, nobody could bullshit her. She could read people, and she could see the truth, and so she had a lot of potential to her character, but they didn't really use.
No, they couldn't. I think the biggest waste of the show, and it seems on many shows that we're noticing, was Marta Dusseldorf, was Sheila, who I sort of never got the point of.
Yeah.
You know, it was just a backstory to Lou and Reb, and Reb made my teeth itch.
That's a good
drove
one.
me crazy. It was like, oh,
I hated Reb too.
I did. It was just made no sense. If you want to be a man, then step up to the plate, dude. Just quit crying over everything. You know, you be the strong one. Why are you letting Lou do that for you?
Easier said than done.
Huh?
Easier said than done.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Especially with Lou, she's such a psychopath. But yeah, there were some characters that they just didn't use well, or they didn't use in a capacity they could have been at forefront in part of the cast. You know, the main pieces of the cast.
I think part of the problem with Wentworth was an embarrassment of riches. They had too many fascinating characters and interesting storylines, and sometimes they didn't pick the right one to follow. They couldn't delve into all of them, but they made us care about them to the point that we wanted to know, we needed to know, and I think that was the problem. I think there was too much gold to mine.
Well, I think at some point we did mention that they kept adding too many new characters instead of just going into the characters we already know and love and care about.
Yeah, or hated.
Well, but love to hate.
But love to hate, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's her name?
Give us a hint.
The workshop.
The what? Sonia.
God, man, I would have killed her about after 20 minutes.
I loved her.
No, I wanted her to stay forever. Forever.
Oh, my God. She was just so...
Oh, she was delicious.
Yeah, we were crazy about her.
Well, I mean, it's not that, she's just one of those people that, I know personally. It's like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
It comes back to haunt you.
But she was just fun to watch.
Yes,
I wouldn't want her in my life, but she was fun to watch.
I loved her relationship with Boomer.
Yes,
I did too. It was interesting because she was using Boomer the whole time,
but it was helping her. It was helping her.
She was the one who gave Boomer the confidence and the ability to believe in herself.
It was a kind of a mutually beneficial, like a symbiotic relationship in a way.
Yes.
She
Yeah,
was
definitely.
using her, but she also kind of
gave her,
and she also saw her as a little
she gave
project,
her credit too. She gave her a feeling of worth,
because
self-worth.
I think Sonia liked to think of herself as a benevolent psychopath who also empowered other people, and I think she really enjoyed having that feeling of kind of boosting her up, and she got it, and she took it, and she was able to use it. She was like that child who never got it from her mother, and was able to get a little bit from her.
What's the exchange that we always do? That
I love your enthusiasm.
I love your enthusiasm. I like your hair. Boomer, and we do that quite a bit in this house.
So we spend our, this will be the last thing I say, because I could go on forever, but so we often don't hear this, and I, sometimes am amiss in letting people know that you guys make a difference whether you think that you do or not. There's every word, every painting, every picture, every video of squirrels upside down to your windows and your cats, and you're making a difference, and not everybody can do that in the world, and so I thank you for that. You certainly added to my life, and it's been an experience that I will not soon forget.
Randy,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy. You're so generous, and you're so kind, and you're so smart. I can't tell you what that means.
Yeah.
Well, give me a call if you ever have,
if we need cheering up.
Yeah. You better not ask that. You may be getting a phone call after every painting.
You can call me anytime.
This was fascinating, though, because, as you may have figured out from our Talking Teal, or just from watching, certainly my Instagram, mental health and that whole aspect of analyzing people and the human nature, and that is something that I think, first of all, is extremely interesting to us, but from the letters that we've gotten over the years to Talking Teal, I think it's something that fascinates a lot of people. And I think that there is huge potential when you do a show about women's prison to show all that. Wentworth wasn't always the best at it, but they did have really good moments where they did provide a window into how people's lives, how things go wrong
to where
yeah, exactly. And oftentimes with compassion and with even that, the small things.
Strangely enough, in a woman's prison, small acts of kindness are very big, and they show that in a place like that.
Right, and we've over the years tried to make sense of it and try to apply it to everyday life in our very tiny way, and you just really provided so much more. You kind of opened it up even further with everything that
with your expertise and your deep knowledge of the subject. Thank you, Randy. Thanks for everything.
So much,
and have a wonderful holiday weekend. Yeah. And we'll
stay in touch.
We'll stay in touch.
I hope we do. Yeah. I absolutely hope we do.
We will. Thank you so much,
Randy. Bye.
Bye.